Hi everyone, welcome back to Inside the Ropes. Gary Cassidy here, and I'm joined by a former 24/7 champion in WWE, formerly known as Tucker. You'll know him from Heavy Machinery, but it's Levi Cooper now, and we're going to get into so much more than his WWE run. How's it going today, man?
It's going really well, man. Doing great. Good to be here.
Excellent. It's great to have you. So, I don't normally share like what my favorite moments are of someone, but I think that's the way I need to start this off, because I've got two favorite moments of seeing Tucker in WWE, and one of them didn't even really air on WWE television, but it was just a little glimpse that I was like, I really wish we got to see more of this. And it was actually, I don't even know if you'll be aware of it, it was on something that aired over here on BT Sport, and it was a little thing following all the WWE superstars during the UK tour. And I believe it was the New Day it was following, and you were just in the background talking to your kid on a phone on like a call. And it was like two things. One, that is obviously it just makes you realize how difficult it is for you guys traveling all around the world. But it was just lovely to see that side of someone as well. Do you have any recollection of that at all? Is that something that's completely passed you by and we're just like, oh, that was amazing?
No, it's funny actually that I do remember the point you're talking about. I think I was in like a staircase kind of deal, and yeah, they were just, being the New Day and being entertaining, kind of cruising around, messing with people or whatever, and just I want to say that was at, man, I think that was in Brighton. I think that was our first stop on that tour.
But I guess that so obviously the traveling must just be the most difficult thing about wrestling for anyone. But I guess for yourself, just having had a newborn kid at that point, how difficult was that?
Yeah, man. I mean, it was big time, just huge adjustments, huge adjustments. Obviously had been, working for, 5 years essentially at the Performance Center to kind of get in quest of that point. So yeah, to get there, and my daughter was born in June of the year right before we went up, so she was about 6 months old when we started going on the road full time. And yeah, man, I mean, it was big time adjustment, difficult in some regards. Required a lot of communication between my wife and I to just kind of figure out how we're gonna make those things happen, and always having to make sure you got a backup plan, because sometimes you be in the call like, hey, we need you to leave tomorrow or whatever. That happened on multiple occasions. So yeah, I mean, with kids it can be pretty stressful until you sort of figure out, just or kind of get your system going.
Yeah, and my other favorite moment of seeing, when you were Tucker in WWE, I'm not sure again if this is a standout for you at all. It was just something that really stood out for me, and it was a particular match, and it was one of the rare singles matches we saw Tucker in on SmackDown against Dolph Ziggler. Now, a lot is made of, collegiate wrestling backgrounds and stuff, but it seemed like something that always got glossed over in commentary, and we didn't really find out that much about, your collegiate background. That match, when what you'd done in the past and what Dolph Ziggler's done in the past, it makes sense that was a great match. Did that stand out for you, and do you feel like it was like a missed opportunity that more wasn't made of your collegiate wrestling background?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think, and a piece of that's on me for sure, of not being like maybe forward enough, or kind of like understanding that was the thing. Like I need to really, kind of push that to the forefront, especially I guess me as the straight man role. I think if I could have done a better job of kind of like really like not necessarily getting into Otis's stuff all the time, and then when he does finally kind of pull me into his stuff, it becomes more of a thing. But I do remember, I think that was the week after WrestleMania, actually, that me and Dolph wrestled, or it might have been actually right before. Was it? And I don't know. We wrestled twice. We wrestled right before WrestleMania,
I think
and
this
right
was the match
afterwards.
right before, as far as I
Okay.
remember. I'm sure it was, but
Yeah,
I remember there being two good
put
ones.
me
But I
down
remember
on the
that one.
stairs, I think.
Yeah, it was the one with the stairs incident. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that was, so that was obviously, well, yeah, I mean, I do remember that match. And I mean, Dolph Ziggler's the man. Anytime, like, love working with him and Bobby Roode, and I mean, most everyone up there, honestly. But Dolph, he very much like he gets it to the umpteenth degree, and he's not like super egotistical when it comes to. He just wants the match to be as good as it can be, and so he's definitely a pleasure to work with him always. I was actually disappointed because the way we were doing that match in the stairs meant that I wasn't going to be a part of the WrestleMania segment that year. And so when we were kind of talking about how I was going to do it and why we were doing what we were doing, I was like, oh man, that kind of sucks, because obviously I would like to be part of WrestleMania, and the Mandy Otis thing was pretty awesome. And yeah, I mean, it was originally that was supposed to be more of like a kind of a 6-way or 8-way thing, but no fault of his own, because Bobby lives in Canada, as soon as the pandemic started happening. I think he was wasn't able to, get to Orlando essentially because of that. And so that's how the WrestleMania thing ended up going down. But yeah, I do remember that match. And like I said, Dolph Ziggler's the man.
Yeah, I think that obviously missing WrestleMania isn't great for anyone, but the fact that you had that match, it definitely stood out for me, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that it stood out to. I'm going to bring it down a bit because I mentioned, that match was brilliant, and the reason that the next thing I'm going to mention was so not brilliant for me as a viewer was because I'd seen that match and I knew what you could do. And I don't know how much this stood out for you, but my least favourite moment of yours in WWE, through no fault of your own, was when you turned up on Raw for the match with Ricochet. And by turned up, I mean, you literally turned up on screen, no build to you having this completely new look. You looked like ridiculously different to what we'd seen in the past. It needed some storytelling. How do you feel about that looking back? Is it something that you're like, oh, and just, it seemed so rushed for me. Was it rushed for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was, the whole circumstances around that was disappointing, obviously. I mean, that was essentially the end of my WWE run, was when I turned to my partner, and then we didn't have a match. And I feel like, off the top, Heavy Machinery had more to give together. I will definitely take some of the blame as like, maybe wasn't forceful enough of kind of like pushing the things that I needed to do to try to get something over in the team, so that it wasn't just like all Otis all the time, which is sort of what it became, and like I said, I understand that some of that's on me. In my mind at the time, I was thinking, well, like, we're going to have a 3-4 year run here. So like him getting the tag and running the comebacks, like that's working right now. There's really no reason for us to like try to reinvent the wheel, when let's just try to kind of squeeze what we can out of that. And then, because when we were wrestling NXT, I used to run comebacks all the time. We would take turns taking the heat and taking the comebacks and doing these. And, like I said, I mean, just when things kind of got going for us on the main roster, that was just sort of the formula, if you will, that was working for us at the time. And Vince liked that. We at one point we had Otis take a heat, and Vince was like, he's not taking the heat anymore. Like, you're the guy taking the heat, so I'm like, okay, message received, right? And so, once the time comes, obviously the pandemic hits, and that kind of flips everything upside down, if you will. And I've talked a little bit about the circumstances surrounding the actual split. And I wasn't even booked that day. Like, I came in, I think I got called on like a Thursday morning to come in for SmackDown on Friday, and that's when we did the El Gran Gordo thing with the Otis and the Lucha mask. And then I was booked for Raw, but I wasn't booked for the pay-per-view on Sunday. So I just thought I was off. I was actually heading to the golf course to play golf on that day at like 1:30. Our normal call time's 2. And I got a text from Travel like, hey, they need you at the stadium. So, okay, well, I'm probably not going to make call time because I like need to go change and get all my stuff or whatever. Like, it's fine, just get there. And so I got there at like 3, and I didn't find out what we were doing until probably 5. The show went live at 6:30 or 7. And I honestly, I feel like a part of that was just kind of like they maybe knew that they didn't want to use me. This is just me guessing. I don't know this for sure, but like how I feel now after the fact is that, they knew maybe that they weren't going to use me. And so, I don't understand how anything else would make sense for us not to have a match. Like, just have him kick my ass up and down the ring on Monday or the next, whatever it is, like, let's do something to, so yeah, when we didn't have a match, and then kind of that next Monday, like, well, it was not the week after, it was the next week, right? That me and Ricochet did, because the day after I split, I wrestled Humberto Carrillo on main event,
yeah,
as a heel. And, like, I don't know if this is the truth or not, but people were like, well, this is kind of a test, just do it and just whatever. So I'm like, all right, and then obviously the next week, I think Ricochet beat me, and like, no disrespect to him either. I'm a fan of his. He's a good athlete and, great performer. But yeah, I mean, it's not like it makes any sense for me to get beat by a guy that's that size in 90 seconds, when, like you said, I mean, I had just kind of went about cutting my hair and doing some stuff because I'm like, well, like, I got to change something here, and yeah, I mean, it, was kind of all downhill from there as far as things and for me in WWE, unfortunately.
Yeah, it was that thing, and it was just like you turned up, and I think you were wearing like really shiny boots and stuff, and I was like, that's a really intriguing look. We hadn't really seen you. I think you wrestled shirtless, so like the tattoo was on display and stuff. How much did you have any input into that look, or was it something that they were just like, "I'll go and do this"?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, that was stuff that I had from when I was wrestling singles before me and Otis started, right? Because, like I said, so the split happened the week before. Like, I didn't know that split was coming. There was no like, and I mean, it always behooves you to have a backup plan, of course, in WWE, some other thing, and I had other ideas, and I pitched a couple of those other ideas, but ultimately, that's WWE is not a great place to try different things, right? You need like a very polished television product before like they're kind of going to put you there. And so I didn't really, I guess I didn't have another kind of polished product because I had only wrestled on TV as heavy machinery, Tucker kind of the foil to Otis. And so that was the gear that I had. And I just brought it that next week because I'm like, well, because when I wrestled as heel against Humberto the day after I turned on Otis, I just had to wear my heavy machinery stuff. I didn't have any other gear, and I didn't know, so yeah, that was basically why that was the gear that I had made kind of well, I had a singlet. I think I was wearing just the tights, but I wasn't wearing the singlet part of it. It was kind of Jim Anvil style, kind of, that's where I kind of took the look from, or whatever that those tights came from. But yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned their pitches. I know that I read that you'd said something about a barbecue man gimmick and, selling aprons and stuff. I've spoke to quite a few people that have been recently released, and they've mentioned just, pitching everything they can. I think Wesley Blake had told me about him wanting to be Huskus Pig and stuff like that. Did you pitch anything else? Was it the kind of thing where you're like, oh, I need to think of something? Was there anything that really stood out aside from the barbecue man gimmick?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, the barbecue was I tried to get that going for me and Otis both, right? I wanted us to kind of be like, that be another thing for us, just because, tag teams aren't always like, there's usually only one tag team story going on television at a time, the championship story. And then like, if you can weave your way in other places, then that's, and so for me, I was thinking, okay, well, like, I don't want it to just be our turn every, few months to be like in the title picture. Let's figure something where you can, we'll just put it like, we'll put us in the back corner, we'll barbecue, and people can just come and interact with us. And like, you're not going to be able to convince me you ain't going to get good content doing that, even if it's just
merch sales,
or whatever.
Merch sales would be incredible. That is
yeah, so and then if somebody can come over and kick our barbecue over and it's on, or whatever, like, so that was around the time that we were moving to Fox.
Yeah.
And I think I just didn't stay on it. Like, I didn't understand kind of which other buttons to keep pressing and how to, like, it was a good idea, and Vince liked the idea, but I think the timing of it was wrong. I pitched a golf guy for myself, kind of like a country club dickhead. I like golf. I'm like, well, I know all the jargon of golf. I could throw out all the lingo and be talking about how I'm going to hit people upside the head with the birdie. You know what I mean? They're going to be making bogeys. I'll be, whatever it is. Like,
then you could have had a great rivalry with Dolph Ziggler from his former caddy thing.
Exactly. So I pitched that. I pitched one where like I'm kind of like a mansplainer, and I'm sort of like my what to say, like, and I pitched that I would have somebody that would be kind of like the person, my taskmaster essentially, and like all I'm doing is just thinking about like how everyone's doing different things wrong and how I need to fix them from doing those wrong things backstage. And then my handler is like hey, it's time to wrestle. Like, you need to focus on how to wrestle right now and not how to. And I'm like, I'm always just like, I think I'm living my life perfect, and everyone else has little flaws in their existence that I can fix for them. But I'm like you kind of mentioned earlier about the pitches. I think that, you can kind of pitch until your face turns blue, but if they don't want to use you, or like they don't have plans for you necessarily, then it's
Yeah, you
the
could pitch the
chances of
best idea
those
on the
pitches, even
planet
if
and
they're
it's,
amazing, like
yeah.
even if you have an amazing pitch and they love it, but they don't see it for you, they'll just give it to someone else.
Yeah.
Like that happens too. So, yeah, I did, but like I said, and I could take some onus of this, that especially like after that Ricochet thing, and after a couple weeks, like I was just like, well, like, I'm anytime you put me in the ring, like I'm gonna give you. It's actually funny because after that Ricochet match, I talked to Vince in Gorilla right afterwards, and I said, hey, like whatever you guys ask me to do, I will always give you 100% no matter what. I'm like, but I'm capable of doing so much more than this, and I hope I get the chance to prove it. And and obviously I didn't, and it is what it is. But yeah.
I'm going to be keeping my eyes out for a golfer to appear on Raw or SmackDown in the coming weeks. That's we'll see if they give that to someone else. You mentioned there, Vince, a couple of times, about being a fan of the barbecue thing, and then you're talking to him in Gorilla. A lot of people mention that they don't actually really get to interact with Vince McMahon, but it seems like you did. Did you feel like you had like a good relationship or rapport there at least?
I interacted with him when it was possible. There was definitely would be months that would go by where I wouldn't really interact with him too much. He's super busy. He's in his office all the time. And like people are always constantly trying to go in there to figure out, because he's kind of signing off on every television segment, So I don't feel like I had necessarily like a great relationship with him. I do feel like, there was a level of respect there at least. I didn't feel like he's Vince, you got to come correct, right? So I'm not going in there every week just like, hey, sir, how are you? Like, no, it's like, okay, I have an idea that I think's a good idea. Like, I've tried to run it up the chain and, whatever. Like, I've shopped it around to a couple writers, a couple producers. They seem like it might be a good idea. So I'll go, I'll run it by Vince and see what he thinks and see if we can't make it happen or whatever. Because if you can get the boss to sign off on it, then
oh yeah, you're sorted. Yeah,
it'll happen. But yeah. And like that's kind of what I was saying about the barbecue thing is like I distinctly remember like him leaving that office and being like, that was the best like kind of pitch conversation we've had with him up to this point, don't you think? Yeah. He's like, yeah, dude, he was like really into it. He was very engaged, like he wasn't on his phone, it was probably only a 10-minute conversation or something. And that's why, like I said, I was just kind of thinking like, oh, well, he seemed to love it and he was writing stuff down. So like, it's probably going to happen, And I think if I would have known, that was kind of early on in our time. If I would have known what I knew now, I would have really like stayed on it with some of the people who were kind of like next down in the chain that could make the moves happen and sort of just constantly staying on it instead of sort of just being like, oh, well, he liked it and I think it'll happen. And then kind of it just didn't and accepting that.
Yeah. Well, one thing that, mentioned kind of the full turn on Otis and stuff like that. It always seemed like, and now looking back, like when Otis won Money in the Bank, it seemed like it could have gone a few directions. And then when you look back at it now, it seems like you were essentially like collateral damage there because, Otis won and then it just always seemed like the only direction and the one that, everyone was speculating about that would have benefited you hugely would have been Otis cashing in for the tag team titles. Was that ever seriously discussed? Was it something that you ever heard of? Or was it like, oh, the internet is speculating about it and that's it?
Yeah, it was never it would purely speculation, I never heard any like concrete things about it, and I said this in an interview like last week, I think, and some people may disagree with this or whatever, but like I personally don't feel like Vince McMahon like is all about tag team wrestling, or that thinks tag team wrestling is like the thing that draws money in his company just based on the way that it's been booked over the last 5 or 10 years. Like maybe, in the 80s and 90s, that was a different story. But then, like I said, this is just my opinion. But I didn't feel like they were going to use the Money in the Bank on the tag team championships because just for that exact reason.
Yeah,
and essentially that, like,
yeah.
you have the money in the bank. It's essentially like you're going to be the world champ, right? I mean, only a couple people have unsuccessfully cashed in. And if you do, that's bad for you as career wise, right? So, I was hopeful, obviously, that, oh, well, maybe that's what they're going to do. That's what they want to do with us, but it became apparent to me anyways, fairly quickly, that they were trying to figure out a way to, well, I don't know, honestly. I don't know exactly what their plan was around that story in the first place, because I was home. I wasn't a part of that kind of Money in the Bank thing at all initially. So yeah, I mean, I was never feeling like they were going to use them on the tag teams. We obviously pitched it and we talked to a few people about that, and based on their reactions, I don't think that was ever in the cards.
Yeah, one thing that I would give the opinion of that's similar to in terms of tag team wrestling is the 24/7 championship. And of course, you won it to the, a couple of times, I think, actually. Looking at that from, your point of view, because as a fan, it does seem like an afterthought or something to use for, comedy angles or stuff like that. And that's about the limit. You mentioned that with the Ricochet match, it felt like that was, beginning of the end, essentially. Did the 24/7 champion stuff change that? Like when you've got the little runs with that, did it give you any hope that you're like, oh, wait, something might happen now?
I mean, I wasn't extremely hopeful, no, just because of the way that things that were kind of going for me in the backstage, and how some of those conversations were, kind of happening, or not happening. I mean, it was like any opportunity to be on television. I'm not going to complain about those opportunities. I know there's a lot of people fighting for those opportunities, and I'm very thankful that, for the time that I did have. Personally, like I wasn't, well, I mean, obviously I wanted to win tag team championships with my man Otis, you know what I mean? Because that was what we were about and that's what we were trying to do. But as far as like, getting a 24/7 championship and that kind of making me feel like I was in a better standing or something, not necessarily, just because, like, I mean, everybody kind of won the championship in that segment where I won it too. I mean, we all pinned each other, you know what I mean? And like I said, that was cool, and something that I guess at least like I will always have on my resume, that, hey, I didn't leave WWE as like no champion ever in anything. At least I did, win the 24/7 championship, in one night, and had that opportunity. Well, me and Otis are forever YOLO County Tag Team Champions in Sacramento, but that's neither here nor there. Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier too, some of it was on me. I mean, after the Otis thing went down and we didn't have a match, I was not in the best headspace either mentally. I was not feeling very positive about, and like I said, I mean, I think I have a pretty good feeling about kind of when people are telling me the truth or not telling me the truth, or when people are kind of trying to give me lip service or just pay me kind of, hey, like, we just want to give you an answer so that you'll stop asking us questions type of thing, And I mean, that was just kind of how it was. Like, I felt like the writing was on the wall. Like, okay, hey, look, you guys were in a tag team for 2 years. We split up and we didn't have any matches. Then, like, that's the only real shot you have, especially without a crowd, to like get a new gimmick going, And like, once that's passed up, well, it's going to be really difficult for me to get a new thing kind of going, because in the fans' eyes, it's like, well, what's going on here? This is all like wonky, and just kind of doesn't make any sense. There's not a great jumping off point here. So, like I said, I kind of felt like I was going to get let go probably by about a month after the split, and kind of just the way things were going. It doesn't mean I didn't, try, and come to work and still pitch some ideas or whatever. But I wasn't feeling super hopeful, if I'm being completely honest.
Yeah. One thing that you mentioned a few times there is, or even actually since the start of the interview, has been like about kind of accountability and yourself, taking ownership of things that went wrong. That goes hand in hand with something that happened after you left WWE, where you put up a photo looking very shredded, very cut, doing some DDP yoga, which, you know, I've done a wee bit of it myself. It does completely change your mindset, obviously changes you physically as well. How important has that been for you doing DDP yoga?
Super important, man. Super important. Well, around my 30th birthday, which I'm almost 31 here. I'll be 31 in 2 weeks. I was having some really serious hip issues, right hip flexor issues, you know, and had been having some kind of inside abductor things going on for a few years, you know, and just kind of like had gotten pain there and having a hard time really like with my mobility in my hip and it moving the way I wanted it to. And, you know, so I think at my biggest in WWE, I was like 325, you know, and pretty consistently in my heavy machinery run, I was over 300 pounds or right at the 300-pound mark. You know, that when I wrestled in college, I was like 265 or so. So, you know, that extra weight does take a toll on your joints over time. Yeah. And what I want to say, like, well, I just realized that basically for those 30 years, or since I'd started training, you know, lifting weights and whatnot, that, you know, the entire time I'd spent in an attempt to get bigger, faster, and stronger, irregardless of the cost to my long-term health, right? Like, hey, I want to be the best athlete I can be. And to do that, like my training goal is going to be just to get bigger, faster, and stronger, you know? And so to me, when you're trying to reach a goal, and you kind of come up against an obstacle, you can do two things. You can dig in, which means kind of do all the same things you've been doing, but just do more of them or do them harder, right? Or you can innovate, which means, you know, you either take what other people are doing or you try to find a new way of solving that particular problem. Okay, so for 15 years, I'm innovating and digging in on the problem of trying to get bigger, faster, and stronger. Well, finally, I realized, okay, there's a third thing here that you have to take into account sometimes, and that's a pivot when your goal is not serving you exactly the way that you want it to. Yeah. And so I realized, oh man, like I can squat 500 pounds, but I can't do it correctly. Like my technique is wrong. And I'm realizing now, like I can't breathe properly up under my diaphragm here. Like I'm super weak. And so, you know, I had been doing DDPY a little bit here and there, and it was kind of a long-winded thing, but basically, you know, I made this giant pivot in my training, and I've, for the better part of a year, I've been, you know, only in search of greater mobility. And I have this book called The Modern Art and Science of Mobility, and it has all your functional muscular chains. There's 12 of them. And so I've been focusing on those and, you know, so that my body's kinetic energy moves in the way that it's supposed to move, and that I'm, you know, not having these mobility positions that I can't hit, and essentially my body can't protect itself in the way that it's designed to protect itself, and bolstering my core strength. And yeah, DDPY has been a massive, massive part of that. Physically, obviously, I've talked about a lot, but then, you know, on top of it, yeah, the mental piece too. You know, that's kind of another long-winded story, I guess. But for me, you know, mentally, things were fairly challenging, right? Especially once the pandemic started and things weren't going that well for heavy machinery. You know, I mean, even from like April or after Otis won the Money in the Bank up until the split, you know, I guess like there was a chunk of time there where we weren't really doing too much. He was just kind of doing his stuff. And then we ended up doing, you know, the Miz and Morrison, the court date angle. Yeah. And that was sort of the end of what we had. And I'm sure, you know, there's a lot of people in the world that were, you know, everybody's going through crazy stuff in the last 2 years, right? I mean, it's just been, everybody's world's been thrown upside down. And you know, so mental health around that has been the challenge for sure. I'm sure it's been a challenge for a lot of people. And you know, for me, I discovered that my ego was too attached to wrestling, and not just wrestling, but the highs and lows, if you will. You know, like as an amateur athlete, it was easier for me to attach my ego to wins and losses because I was in direct control of those things. But even then, I tell as many amateur athletes as I can now to try to disattach your ego from the outcome and attach it to the process. And that's the thing with which I think I've shifted a lot of that ego energy onto my marriage and my ability to be a father, right? So what makes me feel good about me now is more about being a good husband and being a good father than it is about being a good wrestler. And that, being a wrestler is just a piece of who I am. It's not, the bulk of my identity.
Yeah.
And for a lot of my life, it was the bulk of my identity. So, that's, and just kind of that goes hand in hand with the yoga, because in my opinion, it gives you that time every morning to, see what's kind of coming at you, right? You just take a stop. I mean, slow down a little bit and give not just your body, but give your mind a chance to tell you what's kind of there and what are the things they're like cycling all the time for you, and I mean, I could go on and on. I've done a lot of studying about this mental health thing because I believe it's very important, and it's something that the world doesn't talk about nearly enough, and self-care in general, I think is a massive, massive thing, and something I'm very motivated to try to help other people with, because I know it's not, something that I took as seriously as I should have, for some of my life up to this point. And it's something that, just a half an hour a day in the morning of a little bit of stretching and a little bit of mindfulness, I know it improves my day exponentially. And I think it has the power to do that for a lot of people, and just kind of realize that, the things that maybe you're worrying about, all that negative self-talk that you have in your mind is just your perception, and it's not the reality of the world. And if you can kind of take a step back and figure out what's super important to you and what really matters in your life, and you make decisions in service of those things, you're going to be a lot happier person.
Yeah, definitely. I love that message. And that's the thing that I found with, the DDPY in particular. You mentioned just having half an hour. For me, it's half an hour of not being on social media or anything like that, just to focus. But one thing, I think I've noticed you doing the Black Crow, so this might be the answer. I love like the diamond cutters and superstar and stuff. Everyone's got a favorite DDPY move. Does Levi have a favorite DDPY move?
Oh, my favorite move, huh? Man. Boy, I think my favorite move is when you stand up with your feet together and you do this one.
Oh man,
to the side, that one. For a long time I hated it to the max. And it was interesting because, this is like kind of along the lines of what we're talking about, but I was trying to follow the person I saw on the screen, and then I realized, oh man, like I'm not flexible enough to do that. Like I got to back it up and do it. I can't go very far, but like, that's okay. I need to make sure to focus on my breathing and my, and it's like, we all want to do the cool stuff. We all want to do the top stuff, but in order to do those things correctly, you have to be really solid at the fundamental level, and that to me is true of like almost anything in life, is like, you even if you can do the cool stuff, if you're not sound fundamentally, then, you're going to run up against times when like that's exactly what's required. You don't need to be doing fancy stuff. You need to just be able to know how to do, addition, like, and so that's why I like that one. That's my favorite.
Yeah, that's like me on day one trying to lift my foot above my head, going, why can I not do this? And it's like, oh wait, you need to be doing it for a long time.
Oh yeah, it's called a yoga practice, right? It's called yoga practice, not yoga. You can do it right away.
Yeah, exactly.
And that kind of like goes back to what I was talking about, your ego and the journey, right? And like feel good about yourself. Okay, nobody needs to practice negative self-talk. Like we all as human beings, we got that part down. We're pretty good at disparaging ourselves in our brain. But the thing we need to practice is positive self-talk. It's like celebrate your small wins. If you wake up in the morning and do 30 minutes of DDPY, or you go for a walk in the morning, or whatever it is, like you did something, you woke up in the morning to take care of yourself, to improve your day and improve yourself, like then you need to be telling yourself in your brain, hey, good job. I did a good job this morning. Like I got up, I could have slept in, I could have done these, I could have spent half an hour on social media. I could have wasted my time in any number of ways, but instead I focused my time and energy and I improved at something, and I should be proud of myself for that.
Most definitely. I've got one final thing before we move on to the little 20 questions gimmick. I hope the answer to this is you becoming a DDPY instructor, because man, I could listen to you, speak about how important mental health and physical health is all day. I know I'm not going to get the scoop. I know you're not going to say, I am going to Impact or AEW or Ring of Honor. So I just want to ask, what is next for Levi Cooper? What is next in the general sense?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because that is part of my plan is, I've been streaming on Twitch and I've been getting that going a lot. I have another child that's due in early October. So I'm going to spend some time at home and I really want to just be a part of the newborn process. So I'm going to take some trips this, right early on in the summer here and do some signings and do a little bit of wrestling. And I'm 2022, I'm hitting the ground running full speed. I'm going to kick it back and sort of, think about building a new character as building a house and really just work on the foundation. And for me, that's amateur wrestling, and just kind of reminding everyone, hey, these are the things I'm capable of doing. This is the reason why I got into pro wrestling in the first place. When you strip away all the facade and the jean jackets and all that, like, this is really who I am. This is really what I'm all about. And it's like the direct correlation between what you give and what you get that I love about amateur wrestling so much. And it's why it makes me, who I am essentially. So character wise, wrestling wise, that's what I'm going to be trying to do. Like I said, I'm Levi Cooper live on Twitch. I've probably only done like 10, 12 sessions and I've only played video games up to this point, but I am planning on doing some barbecuing on my channel and hoping to put out some ingredients and recipes so that people can barbecue with me and we can all, do that together. And my wife and I are going to start doing yoga a couple times a morning on that Twitch channel. And I'm hoping, I've talked to Dallas a couple times and I don't feel like I'm where I want to be in my personal practice. That I still feel like I have a little bit more to improve on in a couple of areas before I really want to like fully dig into potentially becoming an instructor, because like I said, I think for me, I've learned the lesson that, I need to really feel like I'm perfectly in the space for myself before I kind of launch myself full force into, something else like that. But, definitely I'm going to keep wrestling. Definitely you're going to see me around. And, like I said, I'm just hoping to become the best professional wrestler that Levi Cooper is capable of becoming, not compare myself to anyone else, not setting the goal to get to this particular place or that particular place, but just to improve as an artist and a performer on a daily basis and to see how good I can get for myself.
I love that, man. I feel like we're going to see a very different person when you're back in the ring in that.